How's everybody doing? And welcome back to the New York City 1-2-1 build in Cities Skylines, everybody's favorite city building game. And in today's episode, we're going to be building two of the most iconic bridges, not only in New York, but in the world, the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. Now, I know I called this out during the last episode that this would be happening, and I think one of the first things I said was that I was not sure if the Brooklyn Bridge asset worked anymore. I had seen that some people said the asset was broken, that they couldn't get it to work, but as you've seen, I've already placed it down, and just by the fact that you're watching this episode right now, yeah, it works just fine. It's a little tricky to work with. It has always been a little tricky to work with, but it's a really nice looking asset, and having such an iconic looking bridge be exactly how it's supposed to look in the game is exactly what I want. And what we'll be doing not only is placing the bridge down, which has already happened, but building all of the connections that it has to the city itself, at least on the Manhattan side. We're not going to be touching the Brooklyn side pretty much at all yet. That will probably happen several episodes down the line. But what's really unique about the Brooklyn Bridge here is that because the FDR was built underneath it much later. The Brooklyn Bridge was built in 1883. The FDR was built much later. And in the 1950s and 1960s, they did a big development program to essentially connect the bridge to the FDR and left that part of the city and left the Brooklyn Bridge just connected with this crazy amount of on-ramps and off-ramps that curl and snake underneath each other. And it looks really wild in real life, and it's even harder to do in Cities Skylines because of how thick, how deep essentially the highways often are. And another thing I mentioned in episode 1 was that I am using the Gray Flame assets, the North American freeways, because they are just a little bit less deep, less thick, and they're much easier to work with. And over the few times that I've built this particular interchange over the years, this is definitely the best that it's ever come out. All the roads really work nicely up and under each other, and I didn't have to, cheat or do anything to, make that transition a little bit easier. But overall, quite happy with how this comes out. And you'll see me kind of cutting around a lot here. There are a lot of cuts in this video because so much of building this is me being in the game, and then looking at my second monitor and trying to understand exactly what connects to what, because it's super hard to see even from the normal Google Maps, but even when you go into like the street view, real view of the city, zooming around, cutting all those angles, it's still really tough to figure out, but try to get it as accurately done here as possible. And of course, these overpasses and underpasses that connect the Brooklyn Bridge, they didn't used to be there. And there's a lot of interesting buildings that used to be in the areas that are now filled with the new plaza they created in front of the bridge, along with all those ramps that they built in the 50s and 60s. And if I have a chance here, I will throw up some pictures on the screen of what those buildings used to look like, and we'll take a deeper look at it during the live play. And the live play today is going to be significantly longer than last week. It's going to be probably close to half of the video. I haven't shot it just yet, but I really want to show you not only those buildings that used to be on Park Row, used to be called Newspaper Row, all these old beautiful buildings that were unfortunately knocked down to build overpasses and underpasses so that cars can get on the bridge, which is just, it's a travesty. But New York and American history in general is littered with examples of gorgeous buildings being knocked down for the sake of modernity. Whatever that means at the time, of course. As we're continuing to watch some of the footage here, I first want to thank everybody for the support you've all shown me for the first episode. I've had more views in the last week or so and more new subscribers than I had in nearly a year of doing the East Yorkshire series, and I don't feel bad about that at all. That was really always the idea, was to learn how to make these videos, get better at creating them, get better at talking about them, get better at video editing and playing the game, etc. and then transition into doing a series that I really wanted to do, which is this one. And of course, New York is going to be something that catches a lot of people's eyes more than, a city in East Yorkshire does. But I did see some of those older videos getting some views and some nice comments from people as well. So if you were one of them, thank you. If you do like these videos, go back and check those out. Some of the early ones were a little bit rough. I had not learned yet really how to even get my voice settings right. And I think that makes a huge difference in the quality of a video. And now we're good at it, so I'm not really too worried. I do want to address some questions though that did come up during some of the feedback in that first video. Somebody had asked what the LUT and the coloring is, so I have all kinds of the visual mods installed, and I could get into detail in those settings, but I probably won't. The LUT though the theme is Springwood, and the LUT is just relight neutral. But I'd really like to hear from all of you in the comments below. Do you like the way this visually looks, or would you like to see it tweaked somehow? I'm very open to doing that at some point. I am certainly not married to the current visual aesthetic of this build. Another way that you will not only get to see more of the city overall, but also more of the aesthetics, and even get to comment on that, will be live streams. So for those of you who were around for my last series, I did do a couple of live streams, which were a lot of fun, but given the limited subscriber base I had at the time, tended to be a little bit quiet. But I'm hoping that hopefully within a few weeks here that we can do live streams for this that will be better attended, to be more interactive, which is really the way that I like to do them. So I'm looking forward to that. If I do them, they will be on YouTube. I will schedule them in advance. So if you're subscribed, you should see that in your feed. And if you're not subscribed, click that button. What are you waiting for? So what you're seeing here is just the final few ramps that lead under the bridge. So there are roads that lead to and from the FDR in both directions. There are roads that lead off the bridge and spill out onto the streets. And then there are a few roads that in real life are only accessed by the police, since one police plaza is like right at the foot of the bridge. In the game though, I probably won't have those be for the police, because I just don't feel like doing that. But you will see in the live play, I've built a lot of the buildings right around the foot of the bridge, which not only brings it to life a little bit, but will further help me to illustrate what I was talking about, how the area around there used to be quite a bit different. What is going to happen next for just a couple of minutes here is building the roads in between the two bridges. So even though I'm not connecting the bridges over the water into Brooklyn yet, so I don't have to really worry about the cars going over the bridge, I do want to make sure that any cars that are using any of the ramps or are getting from one place to another can navigate their way between the bridges. It's also a lot easier to build those now than it is to try to build them underneath a bridge that's already been built. So that's why you're seeing me here extend out the FDR and create some of those initial connections. And I know some of the ramps here might look a little not circular, a little bit wonky, but I actually did a lot of work off camera for this, which is why I wanted to do the longer live play. I built a whole bunch of the quays and piers along the East River waterfront, as well as building the kind of pier, I guess, the footing underneath the Manhattan side tower of the bridge, which is a new technique that I hadn't used before, and I think it came out really nice. I'm like really happy with how that looks. I'm gonna have to kind of implement that a little bit more going forward. But really here, just trying to get down some more buildings, because the more that I build, the more roads that I build, the more that I'm running the game. You see the scroll bar on the bottom left, it's going through. We're the space bar has been hit. People are working right now. And I really want to make sure that I continue to add population by building some residential buildings and balancing out what I'm building. All right then, next here is the Manhattan Bridge. Now, to address this, yes, there is a Manhattan Bridge asset on the workshop. It's not full scale though. It's kind of scaled down. I've never actually used it myself, so I'm not going to sit here and judge it too harshly. But when I'm building this series, again, it's not so much about extreme detail, but I'm really looking to make sure that it's functional. And the way that I built this bridge here is the same way that I built the bridge the last time I did this series, and it really works well because it gives me a lot of car traffic on top. We're going to end up with 4 lanes in each direction on the top, and then on the bottom of these bay bridge assets, we're going to be putting in not only the subway, once we get around to building that in a few episodes, but also bike and pedestrian paths. The Brooklyn Bridge asset has bike and pedestrian paths built in, and we'll take a look at those because I extended them into the road network in the live play, but these assets do not. And to me, it's very important, much like in real life in New York, that there are ways for cyclists and pedestrians to get from point A to point B. Now, in New York, in real life, that is often in a very limited way. For instance, the Brooklyn Bridge actually just had a 2-way protected bike lane installed in September of 2021. It probably should have been 2 lanes. Instead, it's one kind of too narrow lane, but separating the pedestrian traffic on the promenade from the cycling traffic that's now on the road is a huge win for New York. And I really want to see more bridges and more roadways for cars changed to be roadways for vehicles. I cannot stress that enough. I mean, New York has, as a city that used to be New Amsterdam, could be very much like old Amsterdam, and be a city of cyclists if we just put a little bit more effort into it and stop kowtowing so much to car drivers. Now, one thing I do also want to ask everybody, I think the bridge is too low. I think I need to raise it up a few meters, but what's basically being done here is I built the bridge in place, I sloped both sides of it, copied it, and stuck it right back into place. And I'll be playing around with this a little bit. It took me quite a while to figure out how to get all the pillars gone. A little bit trickier with the current set of mods I have than it had been in the past. And then all the connections here leading into the Brooklyn Bridge, these are somewhere between temporary and final. They certainly don't look good enough to be final, and they will be detailed and played around with in the future. But until I start putting more buildings in, until I start putting subways in certain places, there's just certain parts of the city that I cannot fully say are done. But we're going to talk about that and a lot more in an extra long live play that's coming up here in just a few seconds. So thank you so much for sticking around. Let's see that live play. All right, and we're back here in the live play, and I think we're going to go in a reverse order. We're going to talk about what's new, what was built off camera, and then we'll take a look back at what was done during the time-lapse portion of this video. So the first thing you'll probably notice as we swing around over the Brooklyn Bridge here is I've built out the piers alongside the East River here. So just some simple, using Move It to move some keys next to each other. But down on this one, I was actually able to snake in a road here and throw in a few of these warehouses, as well as this is just an office building kind of sneaking in here. And when I looked at this at Google Maps, it was really interesting because the building here looks like a really old warehouse building, and it's this kind of blue color. And I tried to match it as best as I could. Maybe didn't quite get it, but little details like that I like. But filling in this whole key here, as well as raising the water levels a little bit, it really, let me hone in a bit on how I want this coastline to look overall. And you'll see here, I also continued that theme around the base of the bridge footing here. So this is just keys, 4 of them with Move It. They're not actually connected because then they get round and not cornered. And then just some ploppable asphalt decals covering up what is otherwise, kind of like a hole in a well and some graphical artifacts, and doesn't really look too nice. Another thing that's been really important for me to build off camera has been some residential housing. Since, as I think I mentioned in the time lapse, I really want the city to be able to grow a little bit alongside everything that I'm doing to actually grow the roads and build some of the other buildings. So this is a interesting area. So this area in New York is referred to as 2 bridges. I'll give you one guess why, and it doesn't count. But there's just a lot of housing projects down here, a lot of public housing, and this asset is actually, I think, labeled in the system as like a housing project building. but it's the exact same shape and size as the buildings that are in this part of area in Manhattan exactly. And really nice little community down here. I threw in a school, which I think really fits nicely, and as the city population grows, we're already at a little bit over 4,000. They will pretty frequently request a lot of education facilities. Some tennis courts, and then a warehouse here, but I think this is actually working as a residential building. So looks like a warehouse, but again, gives us some more citizens coming into the city. And I've also laid down some parking lots for them. And then one thing you'll start to notice, I called out earlier that I still did not have any custom car assets, and now I do. You're still seeing a lot of the vanilla ones because they haven't spawned out of the game yet, even though I did clear the traffic, but I guess it didn't clear the park cars. But I threw in a few different variations of small compact cars all the way up to small and large SUVs. There's Camrys and Hondas and Hyundais and Jeeps as well. I think all cars in America nowadays, they all look so similar to each other that just having those 5 in, I think will bring enough diversity of traffic to the city once all the vanilla cars clear out. I also went ahead and downloaded some more trucks, so to get a lot of the vanilla trucks out of the game as well. All right, the other new things that were built, we have this spruce complex that's been finished off. This is some additional housing just to the south of the bridge here, as well as this Pace University asset, which is just fantastic. And I believe that operates as a university, which is great to kind of have that in from the start, as opposed to finding a way to shoehorn it in later. A lot of these buildings did not exist when I've done previous builds of the city, so this 41 Park Row, or used to be the New York Times building, is right here. Just a really nice asset. And this is what I was mentioning before about all those newspaper row buildings, and if I didn't throw the image up earlier, I'll throw it up now, but those buildings were essentially right here, where Pace is now, and where a lot of these entrance and exit ramps are. So it's kind of fun to think about in New York back in the day that had more beautiful buildings here and a bridge that just, dead-ended here with a trolley terminal and a big public square. And looking forward to building out the rest of this. This is where City Hall is going to go, right in here. And I'll build this whole area out as a park. But for now, we just have some little bits like the municipal building, the courthouse, and then some of the other federal buildings in the area. Some of these buildings' LODs aren't amazing. So if I zoom out a little bit, you'll get some artifacting, which makes long-range views a little bit difficult. But overall, I think they're really, really nice models. And at some point, you got to sacrifice something. Otherwise, these files are going to be absolutely enormous. And bigger assets means I can run less of them. And I want to put as many as I can in this build. This is also a building over here that's new to the workshop. And I'll try to call out the creator if I remember when I'm editing this. But I used to work just to the west of this building, and walking by it every day was always very strange because it's such a beautiful building, but it's so imposing. There's not a lot of buildings in New York that take up an entire block like this, even though this is a partial size, awkwardly shaped block. You can see how most buildings in New York take up just a portion of a block. So this building is always really interests me, and I'm glad that somebody found interest in it as well and put it into the game. And as we continue to wrap up here, I'm going to take a look at the bridges that we built. So as you can see, all the pillars underneath the bridges have been removed. I'm still debating if I'm going to raise up the Manhattan Bridge a bit, but I'm going to have to do so much additional work to it when we do put the subway over it, because it takes a subway line on both the northern and southern sides of the bridge. And I know I'm going to be doing so much work and move it then. If it is too low, I think I'll change it then. But I'm absolutely thrilled with how the Brooklyn Bridge looks. And when we do get to Brooklyn, there is actually another asset that attaches onto it that, this kind of stone embankment that roads can run under and really integrates well with the atmosphere over there in Brooklyn. So I'm wondering, I don't know when we'll get to Brooklyn. I think it could potentially be a while. I'd love to get over there sooner, but I think Manhattan needs to take the precedence to build the infrastructure first. And then you can see some additional detailing over here. I didn't quite finish around One Police Plaza here, but I was able to detail out this entire area, including getting a little church in here, which I need to get some better church assets in general, because there are a lot of churches in New York. This is a great asset from the workshop, but doesn't really necessarily fit for what is actually there in real life. But just throwing some tile down and some trees, and I think it makes a nice little area here. And particularly in Lower Manhattan, when I'm building, it can be really difficult to fill in some of these blocks when you don't have buildings that are the right height or the right feel. But So far with what I'm working with, it's working out okay, and we're going to keep plugging away at it. So going to wrap up here in just a minute, but I want to talk about what's going to happen next. Having a bit of a debate in my head about either going to do the World Trade Center and Battery Park Complex next, or continuing to move northeast into the Lower East Side. So if you have a comment about that, or you have a thought, or you would like to see one or the other, let me know down below. But most of all, thank you so much for spending the time with me today, for watching this video, and I hope to bring you more in the near future. Thank you so much. Bye.